Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final panel of Panel Fest. If you've been sitting in your computer for 2 days straight, I give you a ton of credit. But a lot of great speakers today, and thank you to everyone who shared their insight, and thank you to everybody for tuning in and all of your support. All the conversations we have had at Panel Fest are uniquely important topics that can help our industry grow. I hope you had that one takeaway that will make your life or business better in some way, and a huge thanks to Precision Fermentation for all your support on this event. And to all of you out there in the virtual world, I invite you to join us in person in 2022 for CBP Connects. CBP Connects, presented by Arryved POS, are in-person workshops with a focus on education and networking. They're your opportunity to meet your fellow members face-to-face in an intimate setting. And I hope to see all of you February 7th, 8th, and 9th, 2022, that's unbelievable to say, in Norfolk, Virginia. You can view the complete schedule at cbpconnects.com. And now on to today's conversation. We're going to be diving into why our four guests decided to open additional locations and discuss aspects to consider when planning an expansion, challenges they face, and strategies for success while growing via the taproom model. And normally I go in order. So, David Rings, you would be next. But today I'm going to go a little out of order because, Kary, you and I, we started talking online. We were roommates in Denver, and you'll actually be speaking at the event in February. So I'm calling you out first to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and why you're here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me, and welcome everybody who's watching. So my name is Kary Shumway. I'm a CPA, CFO, currently a CFO for Wormtown Brewery in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I started forgetting things about 10 years ago. So I started writing things down. I'm a manic note taker. So what I started to do was, like, when I would learn stuff about the brewery, about finance, operations, sales, what have you, I'd kind of write it out. And so over time, I turned all of those notes into an online business, craftbreweryfinancialtraining.com, where I basically kind of share what I've learned over the years in terms of how to create a financial plan, do your pro forma, do your business plan, things of that nature, how to cost your beer, price your beer, work with distributors, all the stuff I've kind of been doing over the last 25 years or so. So that's a little bit about me. Excited to be here.
And I know I tell you every time we see you on one of these, I love how approachable you make numbers. You make numbers fun, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, and we joke because the official name of my business is Numbers Are Friends LLC, because they are our friends.
It sounds like a Sesame Street episode. Sean, has your kid watched that one before?
Yeah, I'm definitely the math guy of the household, and I think my kid's picking up on it. So my poor wife, she's going to be the outcast in the group when it comes to that. So yeah, I'm sure he would watch the heck out of that one.
All right.
Well, Sean, when you were not watching Sesame Street with your little one, what do you do in the beer world?
So I'm the owner and CEO over at Pontoon Brewing here in Atlanta, Georgia. We're technically Sandy Springs. If Atlanta people heard that, they'd be like, "That's not Atlanta," but no one else knows where Sandy Springs is. It's a northern suburb in Atlanta. So, yeah, and so we've been open. Our 4th anniversary is coming up in February, and so we will brick and mortar for 4 years, contract brewed 3 years before that. And we are opening our second location. We just 14, 15 months of closing our loan because of COVID. So I feel like I could bring a bunch of fun stuff. I'm going to say fun stuff about us opening up our second facility. So we're opening up our production facility, and it will also accompany a tap room, a small eating space. So, yeah.
I'm excited to hear the lessons learned so far. In Rings, we met in Denver, which was a pleasure. And
Finally.
You haven't opened your second location yet. So I'm really excited to have you and Sean's input on the journey so far. But tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I'm with Cedar Springs Brewing Company, and we started 8 years ago, I believe. I actually was in the industry back in the late 90s. I worked for 3 different breweries back then, and I got out. Actually, Kary, it's nice to see you because I get your email newsletters. But I got out and wore a suit and tie for 15 years in the financial world, and then come to my senses, and that was the college degree you had to use. So I sold my business and jump feet first back into this. And I'm a weirdo because I make old beer. I don't make any of this, any new stuff, no sours, no hazies, unless you count Weiss beer as a hazy. We do old school German beer, So, which is really odd nowadays in the craft world. But we opened our tap room 6 years ago, and we had a second tap room scheduled to open 18 months ago. Hashtag COVID. And we shuffled a few things around. We ended up purchasing the space that we originally were going to lease, and went through the whole bank refinance thing that Sean's talking about as well. And so we are scheduled to open in January now at this point. So,
and I'm enjoying following all your pictures you're putting out on social media. It's been cool to see the journey happen.
It's been an adventure, and nothing in this craft world is a straight line, is it?
Now, John, last but not least, with Warpwing, tell everybody a little about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is John Haggerty with Warpwing Brewing Company. I am one of the 2 managing members here. We don't have super fancy titles like CFO and CEO and that sort of thing, but I help run the company. My personal background is in the brewery. I've been working in or running or managing breweries since '93. And so when we started this, that was really my role, was to run the production company. There was 4 of us to start with. There's now 2 of us, as I mentioned. So I've had to take on some other responsibilities here as well. So I directly supervise the management of all our retail spaces too, of which we're about to open the 3rd place here any week. And oversee, the production of all our beer. And then my partner, Nick, does all the sales and marketing, works a little bit with the finance team. And then one of our investors, Larry Westbrook, he really heads up the finance team. That's his specialty. And thank God, because if it were up to me, we'd probably be broke. So Larry helps keep me on the rails. So that's good.
Well, a pleasure having you here today. And John, you alluded to like all the responsibilities you have at the brewery. You have all these different hats that you wear. So why on earth did you even decide to open a second location back then?
Well, I think that there's a lot of reasons to do anything. And of course, I don't want to sound, I love beer. I do this because I love beer, right? If I didn't love beer, I'd be doing something else. But I want to make money, right? And
you're running a business.
This is a business, and so we're trying to be a profitable company. There's many different ways to deliver your beer into the hand of your consumer, but the one that you control the most, of course, is your own tap room. And so there's a lot of positives around that. The margins are a little better. The ability to control the product from start to finish is easier. You control the message that's being told about your brand. And so it just made sense, when we got down to it, particularly with what's going on in the wider beer market. As I'm sure all of my partners here on the panel will attest, the wholesale beer market's been flat or in decline for a few years now, starting in about late 2018. So it was an opportunity for us to grow, not only financially, but also in terms of getting the Warpwing message out to the consumer and continuing to maintain our production levels and so on and so forth. So all of those things kind of went into that decision. And then it was a matter of finding, the right opportunity in what made good business sense and, in terms of where to locate it and so forth.
And you mentioned your finance guy. Was it John Westbrook? Was that his name?
Larry. Yeah.
Larry Westbrook, not another John. What was Larry part of the initial team when you first launched Warpwing, or did he come on to help out with future locations?
No, he came along later. There were 2 other gentlemen that were part of that team when we started. They both did good work for us, but at a particular point in our life cycle, what we all wanted from the company was not the same, and so it just made sense to create some separations, and those, it didn't happen 2 and 2. It was 4 of us, and then one guy left, and there was 3 of us, and then the next guy left, and now it's Nick and I as the managing members. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing all that, John.
Yeah.
Now, Kary, how about you? You've got a few locations. How did that even come to be? Was it a conversation around beers one night? Like, hey, we need more of these. And, we got popped a few Taprooms in, different locations, or, what was the beginning of that conversation when you even thought about expansion?
We had a really small taproom in Worcester, right on Shrewsbury Street, if anyone's familiar with that restaurant row, which, the model was come in, have a beer or two, and then you go out to dinner somewhere else. And that was fine, but it was very limited. I mean, the size was a limiting factor. You could only get so many people in. We had a patio, but it really wasn't winterized. So it was kind of like a 2.5 season, as New England is. And honestly, an opportunity came up to open a second tap room at Patriot Place near Gillette Stadium, which is where the Patriots play. So you have the Patriots, you have the New England Revolution soccer team, you've got concerts. Patriot Place, if anyone's not familiar with it, is like a huge outdoor shopping mall. It's just a beautiful. So anyway, a brewery was exiting there. We had the opportunity to come in and take over the lease. And we did all the number crunching. And the end result was it's kind of a beautiful thing. There's so many people. I forget the exact numbers, but I want to say it's some absurd number, like 2 million people a year roll through Patriot Place. So kind of like as John was saying, you get larger exposure. So if you plant flags in different markets, geographic locations, not only are you capturing sort of that taproom profit, but you're expanding the number of eyes that learn about your brands. And we also said, well, this is an opportunity to have a pilot brew system. Our main brewery has a 30 barrel. It's hard to do. So we did a 7 barrel, and we're cranking. And the other cool thing is we can do partnerships with some of the visiting football teams. So Arizona rolls in, you work with a brewery in Arizona, and you do a collab brew for when the Arizona Cardinals come to town, for example. And you can't pull that off every time, but so that was the impetus for it. The opportunity presented itself. We all me and my partners love sports, went crazy for it. So it was just like, all right, let's do it. And it's been great.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Kary. Now, Rings and Sean, your second locations aren't open just yet, but what was the process like when you decided you wanted to expand?
Yeah. So I mean, we hit capacity. So we opened up Pontoon originally. Knew it was kind of a destination, right? It's not like it's not on a beat path, or it's not on a like accessible path. It's off of a decent road. I sat and did. It was one of the only places that we looked at that didn't have a traffic count. So I actually sat out there with like a lawn chair for a couple days and just like sat there, and it seemed like there was a ton of traffic on there, but it's a lot of businesses in the area. So, and apartment complexes. So we didn't get as much of the draw from the local community as we thought. So we kind of became a destination brewery. There's not a lot of food near us. And so, we've been kind of leaning harder into the distribution model. Like our first year, we hit like 2,200 barrels. The second year we were at, almost 4. This year, or last year, we were at a little over 6. And then this year we're be around 7. And so, distribution's been fairly nice. We just distribute in multiple states, but I forget. I think it was John that said this, but someone on the panel said that, it's a way that you can control your the most aspects of your beer, better margins, better customer interfacing. You're able to control, what the customer sees, tastes, perceives. And so with the current climate, we're like, we really need to expand for distribution purposes. We hit capacity in February 2020 and been contract brewing, which is not my favorite. And we're like, we're just going to open up a production facility. And for a short amount of time, we actually thought about not opening a tap room in that spot, just focusing on production. And that's such a silly thing to do, considering the revenue that a tap room generates. And something else that John said was, kind of a new area. It's only 12 miles away from our current facility, but in Atlanta, that's 45 minutes, because everywhere you go in Atlanta is at least 30 minutes, even if it's a mile down the road. And so it's a whole new area, a whole new demographic, a whole new customer base that we can grow. And you could go to the Tucker location or the Sandy Springs location, and there's a chance you may not know about the other one, just with how large Atlanta is. And so it made sense to open up another facility. It gives us a little bit more free range on what kind of styles we can do, separating out the facilities, having some specialties in one area, like we're, barrel aging a lager, focusing on one area, and then the other one's all the crazy shit that we do, stuff we do. So I mean, that was, it made sense to open up a second tap room. I don't know why we even thought about not doing that.
So when you first decided to do it, what was the first step you took to actually go in that direction?
A lot of demographic and just researching different areas that didn't have a ton of breweries, or kind of, were on the up and up as far as developments going in, housing going in. We picked Tucker because Tucker was voted the number one up and coming suburb of Atlanta. There just happened to be the building that we liked the most, and there was a development going in a mile down the road. So it's all these different factors came in, and we're hoping that this could be more of a foot traffic centered space, even though it's our production facility, which would be funny if it ends up having a higher traffic rate than our current one.
Are there any other breweries in that general vicinity?
There are, which is great. We were the first brewery in Sandy Springs. We actually helped write the laws with their city attorney, and there's one brewery coming in now, but it's pretty far down the road, whereas in this area there's a brewery 0.6 miles away, there's a brewery 1.5 miles away, and then there's one 4 miles away. And I look at that as good. I want more breweries in the area because people generally hop around.
Yeah, that's been our experience too, Sean. I agree. I mean, there's some benefits to some synergy with multiple breweries within a walk or a short drive.
Absolutely. And it's a very collaborative industry too. So, I mean, we all kind of prop each other up and plan releases out. I mean, I do that with breweries that are 3 miles away from us at our current spot. And it's definitely one of my favorite parts of the brewing industry is how collaborative and how much as competing businesses work together in here, which is really
you do
cool.
A lot of collaborations. It's fun following you and your travels and the people you're brewing with. So great work on that.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
No, Rings, you're up. You're opening your new location in literally about a month and a half?
Yeah, we're targeted in January, and it's been interesting to hear a lot of the other comments here, because I think there's bits and pieces of all this. I mean, when we opened originally, we're in a small town of 3,500 people, and we're north of Grand Rapids, so that's kind of our metropolitan area. And our original game plan, obviously focusing in a particular style range of product, was always to distribute. We had, before COVID, probably 60, 80 or so accounts out there that were serving us primarily up and down Western Michigan. But I think a couple things have happened in the big picture. We have wholesaler consolidation. That's in fact a large player, a large multi-state player just came into Michigan. Distribution is a volume game, period. I mean, you've got to do significant volume really to make that a profitable deal. And with a supplier consolidation, a wholesaler consolidation, that's going to be a tougher and tougher game. And we were really doing a lot of analysis as we came into this plan to move forward with another tap room. On which path to take. We have an option on a 6-acre parcel to build a production facility that's really right around the corner from us, and we started doing the math on the investment that it was going to take to support your brand and what it was going to take in terms of volume versus the alternative. And it's not rocket science. Kary will tell you to start doing the math and figure out distribution again is a volume game. On premise is a margin game, and this industry is traditionally measured in volume, but that really isn't the measurement that you want to be looking at. There's a lot of breweries out there that are throwing a lot of product in the effort out to the wall in an effort to grow. And I'm not sure that it's very profitable in what they're actually doing. In fact, I would argue a lot of the smaller and medium-sized folks that are throwing product into distribution and in package are probably not making any money at it. So a lot of these things kind of added up, and we actually had originally planned to open 2 locations at last year or 2 years ago when we started this process. And again, with the COVID situation, we dropped one of them to focus on the other. But this is going to be different for us too. We've driven everything, and Andrew, you kind of mentioned our social media and some of our grassroots marketing. We've had to work very, very hard to get people to make a 15, 20 minute or more drive. And those are the people who are close. And really we draw from an hour radius for what we do. In this little tiny town. We were the first new construction in this town in 40 years. To downtown where we are now, Sean kind of mentioned, but we've got 5 breweries that are right up and down a 4-block radius. So there's walking and foot traffic there, which is something we've never had. And there's a lot of pent up demand because, as I mentioned, we weren't distributing a ton, and then B, we pulled back completely on COVID. We have 6 core accounts, and really those core accounts are advertisements for us to bring people up here. We're not making money doing it. We're doing it so that people are aware of our brand and make the drive up to come see us in our small little town of Cedar Springs. So this is unusual, and it's a way for us to serve the pent-up demand in an area that in a physical location that we can control the product, we can control the message. People mispronounce our beers all the time. A lot of the stuff has German names, and so it's a way for us to really get the message and touch people, and really to go back. And Hags and I have known each other a long time, but from when I was in the industry back in the 90s prior, and that's the way it really was. It was a one-on-one game. You were talking to people one-on-one that would walk in with wide eyes and order a Bud Light, and they're like, "Oh, you make beer here?" And I think we've gotten used to this, that everybody knows what craft is. Everybody knows what an IPA is. And I think a lot of craft brewers have gotten away from that personal touch of explaining and telling the message and telling the story on a one-on-one basis. And a tap room gives you the ability to do it. We've spent a lot of time, and Andrew, we've actually used you guys for your secret shopper, because we spent a lot of time and energy over the 6 years of our tap room with our servers meeting every month and doing training to tell that message and to be able to explain the story. Even if they're not beer experts, they can intelligently answer or know where to get the answer, because it really is a people business. It is you are touching people, and you are giving people a new experience that they've never had. And if you can hook them with that, you've got them hooked.
Yeah, it's all about that experience. You all know I'm passionate about that. Now, John and Kary, because you do have those second and multiple locations open right now, I'd love to hear, how you make sure your staff is providing that ultimate experience at each location. As you expand, you can't be everywhere at once. How do you maintain the same consistency of experience?
Kary, you want to go first? Or you want me to?
You go ahead, John.
Well, one of the things that we have done in the past is require the front of the house staff to take the Cicerone service exam, the base level, just because it gives the staff a basis from which to ask their own questions, right? That level isn't going to make them a beer expert per se, but it gives them enough knowledge that then they'll come and ask me, or they'll ask someone else in the company, well, what is this? Or, just so they know how to formulate a question. Because for someone that doesn't know anything about beer, that can be a hard thing to do. So we do that. And really, at the end of the day, I am not as concerned about whether the server or the bartender knows every last thing there is to know about beer. Frankly, it isn't as important as you might think it is. What's most important is that they have a smile on their face, they're engaging with the customer, and they make the person feel like they're welcome. People are going to throw questions at them that they don't know the answer to. And I tell them all right out of the gate, look, if you don't know the answer, don't just make it up. Because somebody's sitting on the other side of the bar, they're probably asking you the question, they already know the answer, and they're just testing you, right? And you're going to look like a bigger idiot if you try to make it up. So don't do that, right? Just tell them you don't know, and you'll go ask somebody that does, or get their email, and we'll email them the answer when you find it, or whatever it is. So really, we put less emphasis on the beer training side. Now that we don't put any, we do put some. What we're mostly trying to do, though, is make sure that the staff is engaging, because when you get to the tap room, we're really competing against other bars and restaurants for that person to sit down in our place versus sit down someplace else. And I have to make sure that service is spot on, right? And that server seems happy being at work, because really what we're doing every day is we're throwing a party, right? And you're deciding to come to our party or not, right? And you want to have fun. You don't want to come in here and hear about my problems, right? I'm supposed to be here to hear about yours, right? And try to help you forget them. So that's the first thing that we're trying to do, and that's where most of the emphasis is. And then as time goes along, we try to backfill that with whatever degree of knowledge that we can provide them on beer. So I don't know if that answers the question or not. I do need to pause here real quick before Kary gives you his 2 cents. Give a shout out to my friend Chris Nordoff, who's throwing stuff up on the comments. I know he's a friend of Dave's too. So
I've been texting him because we can't respond to the comments.
Yeah, exactly. I've been doing the same thing. So Chris, here's to you, brother. Thanks for listening.
Well, let's go to Chris's question right now. That's great timing. I was going to hit it shortly. Now, Chris asked, how much of it, adding that second location, third location, whatever you have it, is outgrowing your current space or trying to expand market? And I think all of you kind of gave unique reasons why you chose to grow. But looking at those options, how much was because you outgrew your current space or simply trying to expand those markets?
Yes.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
No, I answered. That was it.
Yeah, I think this can be a rapid fire round. So a little of both from Rings. John, how about you?
I think it depends, and it's different it's going to probably be different for every one of us. So like for us right now, we're coming up against some space issues in our original site, because that's where our production plant is. And so there's some things happening there that we need to address, and we'll see what the outcome on that is. I think in terms of our second site, that was an opportunity for us to go to a new location. Not that people in Springboro, the main plant's in Dayton, the new location with our pilot system and so forth is in Springboro, which is a suburb about halfway between Dayton and Cincy. So people in Springboro were aware of our brand. It wasn't like they weren't aware of our brand, but it gave us an ability to speak directly to them, A, and then B, it put us that much closer to an even larger market in Cincinnati. And our third place now is going to be in Mason. And so that does that even more. Mason is in a closer suburb to Cincinnati than Springboro even. So we're starting to, build this little bridge down to this major metropolitan area in Cincy. And I think that does us well, because it not only helps us in terms of our retail business, it helps us in terms of our wholesale business, because it just raises our profile.
Yeah, you've mentioned visibility quite a few times, and I love that. No, Kary, we'll jump back into you, because you've grown quite a bit and you're passionate about having that experience. But how do you make sure your staff is able to tell the story the same way and engage the same way at each of the tap rooms?
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, so structurally, we just have the usual. We have taproom manager at each location, so they're, responsible for making sure, the lights are on, the beer's flowing, customer service is a priority, and then we have a hospitality manager that oversees all the locations and tries to bring some consistency relative to that training. So there's that, and then I would echo. I think, what you and I talk a lot about is using sort of data to make decisions. And I think the secret hopper model, where you're getting feedback directly from customers on very specific data points. Me as an analytical guy, customer service, how do you really measure, this customer had a great time, this customer was okay. You're all over the place. But if you have actual data that says, what can we do? What can our staff do? And how do we define like what a good customer experience is? And we've kind of modeled it a lot on what your questions would be, which is, when the customer walks in, do you greet the customer? Yes or no? It's not like, subjective. You either did or you didn't. The customer says you did or you did. So we define that way. Did you suggest that they have a flight? You either did or you didn't. Do you ask them what kind of beer they like? Do you guide them through the process? So it's almost like a checklist in some regards. And then, of course, I have my standard add-on. It's like, did you do the upsell? Did you ask them for to-go beer? You did or you didn't? Because I could see it in the cash register. So that's really it. It's about structure. It's personnel. And we're really lucky. We have really great people, that really love to work at a brewery. They're still out there. It used to be easy, right? People love to work at a brewery. It's just a brewery. You don't even have to pay me. And now you do. You have to pay them. But we're really fortunate. We're really just great people. So it's kind of a combination of those things.
No, I love the focus on quality of experience. And Kary, you mentioned you have taproom managers at each location. And John, I'd love to hear your feedback on this. And Brings and Sean, I'd love to hear what you're planning to do, because as you grow, you need more people on your team. You can't do everything yourself with the people you have. They can only do but so much. How have you added to your management and leadership teams, as you've expand or plan to expand? And at this point, anyone just jump in. It's a free for all.
Yeah. Well, I'll echo what Kary said. I mean, it sounds like we have a similar setup. We have two people, which, in-house, we call them our general manager and our beverage manager. Aaron, who we hired as our general manager, we hired him primarily because of his background in the kitchen and his ability to run food. And so sort of the unofficial way that it works is that Aaron really supervises all the food service and getting the kitchen and that side of it set up. And Jason manages the bar and the table service and gets that side of it set up. And they oversee, all the places. And then we have also kitchen manager and bar manager on site at each location as well. So there's a common theme, common message being put into each place that they're responsible for overseeing.
When you had just one location, did you feel this structured?
No, I mean, we were kind of that way. We had the bar manager and we had a kitchen manager, and there wasn't really anything over that. And as we were starting to walk into this bigger, view of the retail world, first we started with Aaron as a general manager, had him starting to make sure we had everything in the original space tight and how we needed it to be, so that we could then step out and go to the next location and make sure we get that one set up and so on and so forth. And of course, within that, there's a certain amount of turmoil, right? Because as we all know from our working careers, change begets angst within any group of human beings. And so, some people, they fall off because they don't like the new structure. And, of course, other people, it appeals to them very well. And so they come in. And so there's going to be a certain amount of that whenever you have this stuff, just because that's what change does. And it's okay, right? That's an okay thing to have happen. I mean, I'd rather have someone tell me, hey, look, I prefer a smaller organization than a bigger one, so I'm going to go work for a smaller one. Great. It doesn't hurt my feelings. That's okay.
Well, you kind of touched a little bit there, Andrew, on, I think, one of the challenges is an old truism in restaurants that you can have one restaurant or you can have three or more, but you can't have two. Because there is challenges there in trying to put that extra level of you can call it bureaucracy, but of organization in there and structure, so that you can track. I mean, obviously, when you get to a certain number of people and you can't know everybody personally the way that you knew your original crew. So there has to be organizations there, and there has to be a way to follow up and hold people accountable, et cetera. So, that is one of the challenges. And Sean, you guys are probably facing the same thing here as you get into the second thing. But it's really hard with two. Now, in our case, we have a full restaurant. We're a distillery and a winemaker as well, and we have a full restaurant in our small town location. And the one that we're putting in town is smaller. It's about half the size, and it's a smaller brewery, and it's not a full restaurant. We just have really a deli in there, more of a grab and go. So we don't need necessarily the same management team that we have in the home. And part of it really is even looking in the crystal ball when, as you know, $15 comes around everywhere, that we can run this with less labor, trying to make it more efficient, that everybody who is there makes a lot more money. We can put that we can maintain the benefit structures that we have in place, and make it a rewarding place. We still have originals at our main location, and the vast majority of our staff has been here 3 or more years. So we want to maintain that culture, you know, and that is a challenge as you open up another place when, like I said, you can't actually know everybody and can't have the same personal relationship with more people that you did, you know, in your original group who have been to the front lines with you. So,
but that comes hand in hand with making the decision to grow. You know, as you grow,
if you're not growing, you're dying, you know, so that's, you know,
and it's the challenge of staying authentic into your roots, you know, as you expand, and that's hard to do. And, you know, you might not know how to do it when you decide to grow, but you're going to have to figure it out along the way.
I think that's been one of the hardest parts for like me personally. I am a bit of a gab. You can't shut me up most times. I love going out and meeting customers. Beer festivals are in collaborations with some of my favorite things because you just get to do what you love at that point. You know, at this point in my career, I am doing a lot more administrative things than I really wanted to. I got out of the sports industry to do more brewing related things, but at this point it's a necessary evil, and I, you know, am fine with what I'm doing now. But that part is specifically with, as we grow, I think we're at 34 employees now, and it's really difficult. You know, we do employee satisfaction surveys, send those out, and I think it was year 2 or year 3, I got a couple back that were, you know, really upset that I didn't have a personal relationship with them as much as they wanted. And I agree. That's something that I want to as well, but I only have so many hours in the day. And that was right around when my first child was born too. So it's like, I am dividing time as much as I can. And, you know, the first year of having a kid and really like expanding, you know, I worked way too hard to try and make something work that ultimately is not even a good use of my time. And I feel bad saying that, but at the same time, what it does and what I've gotten around to and I feel good about is this gives me an opportunity to bring up people who are passionate, that want to drive and find something in their career to make, you know, that's their stamp on their resume that shows what they can do. And so it's turned into, you know, I joke that when I first opened up, I was like, God, I wish I could clone myself 8 times. I don't feel that way at all anymore. Not at all. I think if I clone myself 8 times, I'd be already out of business. You know, the people that we brought on are awesome and they do a great job, and they are so much better in the areas that they came in and had the experiences or the education for that role. And so what we've, you know, with our second location opening up, you know, we are at the point where, you know, we're going to have 2 tap rooms. We have a large tap room at our current spot, about a little under 6,000 square feet, which is pretty daunting for opening and closing and, you know, making sure that there's enough of a presence. So that's been difficult to manage. And with our new facility opening up, it's 3,000 square feet, but it's also 2-story. And so, you know, the upper areas are kind of more of a overflow game area, you know, private event stuff, but still, you know, we have 2 taproom managers at our current spot, and we're going to have to grow that at least by 2. You know, I've talked about having a taproom manager, an assistant taproom manager at both locations, and having a GM that brings all that together to kind of create that synergy and that ideal message. And before, that would have been me. But like I said, you know, my time's better useful looking at data, like Kary. I'm a data guy. That's my background, is, you know, financial analysis and statistics. And so, you know, oftentimes I get roped into things that I want to help with, and I want to give that to my staff. But in reality, I'm taking away from the greater area that I can give back. And so it has been promotion within. It has been, raising people up. I'm going to throw out a figure there that might make the rest of the panelists cringe, but 60% of our operating costs are staff related. We have a very robust staff, and I like to pay well. And it's been difficult, but it's allowed us to expand really quickly, and keep, our retention high. Like during the pandemic, we started paying all the premiums for our staff for benefits, and that sucks. That's $100,000 that I lose. So I'm obviously a proponent of universal health care, but it's one less thing that they had to worry about. And it helped our retention. It helped our employees be more present when they're here, which is helping with onboarding and training and, conveying that message. And so that's something that I had to completely relearn how I had been treated and how I had worked, and learn if I want to keep these people and I want them to do and say the message that I want, I'm going to have to do more to train the people below me and have that kind of be a tree of people below them. And that's incredibly difficult. I don't even know that I'm that good at it. I'm still struggling with it, learning, growing with it. But it's something that I think everyone here can say it's important, and we have to do as we grow, and better utilize our time.
Agreed. And there's not 8 of you. You can't do everything you want like you once thought you could. So, as you go to this new location, are there tasks that you already have that you're going to have to give up to be more successful? And if so, what do you plan to give to other people as their responsibilities?
I mean, just me, for example, I'm still doing a lot of the data analysis on, package allocations, how much is going into kegs, how much is going into cans. I'm sure the entire group here can tell you the cost of everything is skyrocketing. And so can costs. Before, if we had a little bit of overage in cans and we were pouring out of them, not the worst thing in the world. But now with the price that I'm paying for cans, we have like 3 truckloads in our new facility, and I bought them just because I don't want to pay 20 plus cents a can. And we started looking at how much that added up. And so before, I'm doing all that, but now I'm training my taproom people to be able to analyze, and my brewing production manager to be able to look at cost of goods sold. And that way they're just reporting their findings for me. They're reporting the data that they already made, and I'm able to interpret that data. And that's hard because not everyone is into numbers and statistics and data, and it's hard to teach people something that they really hate to do. Totally. But it's necessary.
And one more quick follow-up for you, Sean. Have you thought about bringing on a general manager to help oversee both locations to kind of who are the focus in some of that?
That is the goal. So each location will get have a taproom manager, assistant taproom manager, and then on top of that, we're going to have a GM that will oversee a lot of these areas. We've even talked about pulling just all of front of house under the GM, even marketing and some of these other areas that, I don't I'm overseeing, but I don't have a ton of experience in. I'm able to get someone in that can have a little bit more understanding. Because we don't have a food component, there's not as much of a need for the restaurant side, where I've heard multiple people say they have bar managers or restaurant managers, and that's something that way over my head. So we haven't even touched that because of it. And it's
hire people smarter than you. That's all it is.
Absolutely. That is the name of the game.
Awesome. John, you unmuted yourself. Is there anything you wanted to add to this one?
Well, no, not. I was just kind of in and out because my wife just walked in the office and she wanted to say a couple things to me. So, how come you're still at work at 7?
Well, yeah, I mean, the balance is hard. So, John, I bring you to that. How do you balance running multiple tap rooms, but also your personal life? Is that a struggle that you have, or you take dedicated time for yourself? Obviously hanging out on 7 o'clock on a Tuesday.
Yeah, well, I don't do this every Tuesday. I mean, this is special for you, Andrew. Right.
I owe you a beer next month.
Yeah. I think you have to define some pretty strong boundaries, because you can get sucked in, and it's not only boundaries with stuff like, hey, I can't just sit here and drink beer after work until I can't drink beer anymore. That's one danger, obviously, when you have access to all this beer. and your friends and your customers and people you've gotten to know are just walking in the door one after another. I mean, if you let yourself, you get trapped and you never get out. You also have those same boundaries for work. It's like, look, this is still going to be here tomorrow. I can work till 10 p.m. every night if I really wanted to, and come in tomorrow and still work till 10 p.m. the next night. So at some point you just have to go home, right?
Well, and if you're killing yourself doing this, then you're not loving your life.
Well, right. Yeah, that's right. So there's just some boundaries, knowing what to prioritize, understanding that, as you're starting to feel overtaxed, just like I think Sean was saying, it's like, hey, look, this is starting to slip off my plate. Maybe it's time for me to hand this off to somebody else, right? Because I clearly don't have the bandwidth to manage it correctly. So that's usually, one of my key signs. Like when I screw up, because I do, and I forget to do something, or I miss something, then it's like, okay, one of my responsibilities has to be given away to somebody else, or this isn't going to move forward.
I think that's been kind of, I said I spent 15 years in another industry, and that was one of the things I really learned from that, and that trying to train people to make yourself replaceable as quickly as you possibly can. And, we've had a real process here in the beginning. We had a couple of managers hoping that somebody would rise and be able to take over as a GM role, because I was kind of playing that up front. But, eventually we had to bring in better talent. And make myself replaceable, and have been able to do that in multiple departments now. And as we get into this, I have a couple of more things I'm starting to take off of my to-do list on a regular basis. And we've been blessed. I think Sean kind of hit on it in terms of finding talent that's better than you, and then letting them be aces. And that's really the only way you're going to grow. If you replicate yourself 8 times, use as example, you're never going to be better than what you are. And you have to. Yeah, you have to get people who are better. And you also have to be, I think one of the other key things, especially as a staff grows, and I think all of us who are entrepreneurs are a little bit of an alpha, but I've had to learn to eat a can of shut the fuck up once in a while. And you have to
really hard.
You have to take criticism. This industry is eating, the hospitality industry is eating bucket and snot upon occasion, but you have to, as a leader, be able to take criticism and actually listen when somebody has, as much as I hate Yelp, I do look at it once in a while, because once they had a good comment that was actually productive. So, but the same thing is with your people. When you get feedback from your people, you have to take that stuff in and digest it. You can't take it personal. And I just had a conversation with my GM yesterday, who was frustrated at criticism that she had received, and it's like, you can't take it personal, and giving some other examples why. But that's the only way you're ever gonna get better and grow, and that really is the role. And you get into the balancing of home. My wife has her own business too, so that helps a lot, because she understands this a lot more. But we have to pick and choose when we can get away and spend that family time, but sometimes it isn't going to be every day. So, and that's, the nature of having a lot of things that you're responsible for. But the more things that you can get somebody better than you to take over where they can grow, it's opportunity for people. It allows people to feel invested in what we're all doing. I hate saying owner. We're all part of the same team. But that is the way that you're going to grow, and it's the way you're going to keep yourself sane.
And Rings, I like to completely change it up on you. As you start your second location very soon, you have that German feel. You don't aim to make the haziest of hazies. You're making what? Is it barrel-aged Kolsch and German sour? Is that the plan for the new place?
We're primarily Bavarian, so Weiss beer is our big thing that we're kind of known for. So, yeah.
Well, I can't wait to visit. But for both of your locations, because you have such a unique feel, how do you aim to maintain that consistency of feel, but also have that unique vibe for that local area for your location?
Well, the atmosphere that we've been able, and that was part of the culture. Even the people that are going to the new location, we're bringing them into the current location to kind of get a feel for the culture a little bit. And you want to spread that culture and that atmosphere as part of what makes it a little bit unique. And it's interesting when I opened this, and like I said, having been around the industry since the 90s, and I had a lot of people who would, no, I can't wait for your place to open. And then they were, kind of the, excuse me for using the term, but beer geek type thing. And I'm like, you're not going to like what we do. And, well, what do you mean you're not going to like what we do? I said, you're not going to like what we do. We're not going to do the barrel age, high ABV, high IBU stuff that you stand in line for and trade. That's not what we're going to do. And I say that because I had to come at this from the mentality of, we're going to be what we are, and you have to accept that not everybody is going to appreciate that. But that's one of the things we're excited about in the new location. As I mentioned earlier, there's 5 breweries right up and down that street, and one's a meadery, but they're all really different in what they focus on. In fact, one is New Holland, which is a former landing spot of Hags, but they're one of their locations. But we're all very different in what we do. So I think it's be pretty cool for people in that neighborhood to be able just to wander around and
you've got options. Agreed. John, how about you? You've got 2 locations now, 3rd coming up. If I walk into your tap rooms, and I hope to before too long, is everyone going to feel like the Cheesecake Factory of warped wings, or are there going to be unique components to each that are, individual to each location? What's the feel like, and how do you maintain that, overall consistency, but still unique aspects of each?
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a couple things in that, couple ways to take it. One is, what does a physical space feel like? Right. And I think, like for Dave, maybe it's like, hey, we're Bavarian in one and we're Franconian in the other one. I don't know. But for us, it's been interesting because the first building was an old foundry, which is where our production plant is. So it very much feels like you're sitting in the production plant when you're there. So that has its own vibe. The second one here in Springboro, which is where I'm sitting at right now in the office, this one was built to suit. And so we were able to do a few things here because we controlled the construction of the process. There's a couple things that we do here, like with overhead doors and so forth, to try to open up the envelope of the building that we do downtown as well. But it doesn't look like it's the same business per se, right? There's a couple of thematic things, like the way we list the beers on the chalkboard and so on and so forth. And then the third place in Mason, that was an existing business also. It was originally built as an Irish pub. And then, that business sold, the owner passed, and so they sold it. And the business that came in after it was like an American Italian thing. So they did a bunch of stuff. And so we've had to take all that out. And, and so it just, none of the 3 spaces really are reminiscent of each other. So the commonality is, the food and the beer, right? But the physical space all feels different. So when you go into any of them, they feel unique to themselves, right? But hopefully the level of service and the quality of the food and the quality of the beer is the same. So people are happy with the results that they get out.
No, I love that. Like I said, looking forward to visit. Now, Kary, I want to mix it up once more. You could probably give a master class on this, but in a nutshell, general final recommendations for brewers considering opening more tap rooms.
Masterclass.
You might be able to. You're good.
I always say start with the numbers. So I'm biased, but it's what we tried to do. You start with, oh my gosh, that space is perfect. So how could we not do this? We can't screw it up. It's so good. People are going to love it. There's, those were kind of the conversations we were having when we were looking at, Gillette Stadium. We're like, oh, you can't screw it up. Millions of people are coming through. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure we can screw this up. Let's make sure we can figure out what our costs are. So basically the starting points are, you kind of put it in 2 buckets, right? What are your capital costs going to look like? And that's like, we got to fit up the space. Always costs more, takes longer than you think. Particularly if you're going into a space that isn't, and you're going to add, a brewery, you have lots of infrastructure you need to think about. So what's it going to cost? What's it really going to cost? Really kind of stress test your upfront cost there. And then there's the operating cost, right? Just do a quick pro forma, sales, margins, operating expenses, bottom line, and then match that up against whatever you're going to need to borrow. So make sure you can pay it back. Because I think we all know, taprooms are very profitable. There's no question about it. But there's certain things that can kind of get away from you fast. One of which is, you take on a lot of debt, you're going to have to service that debt. Oh my gosh, that doesn't show up on the income statement. So you just need to be mindful of those things. Others that can get away, certainly payroll and lease expense. As you go into these high rent districts and you're like, whoa, I'm not used to paying that kind of rent. How's that going to match up to what I've been used to? I've been down in this industrial section paying, $6 a foot. Now I'm going to pay, $26 a foot. Oh man, that adds up really fast. So really stress test your capital costs. What's it going to cost? When are you going to need to buy it? How are you going to pay for it? Make sure you consider the equity component, and then do that operating plan as well. Just a quick pro. Well, maybe not a quick, but at minimum a quick pro forma.
No, thank you for all that, Kary. And there's obviously so many aspects we could dive into. And I want to conclude with kind of one split final question. I'd love to either hear a lesson learned. All of you are in different phases of your growth. So either a lesson learned from any point or just something that you would do differently. Looking back, John, maybe on your 3 taprooms, is there one thing you would do differently? Or, Kary, you the same. And, Sean, so far, what's been a lesson you've learned that you think could be helpful for someone else, planning to do the same growth?
Bankers are morons.
Sean, I think you like your banker, don't you?
We do. It, not to say it wasn't tough, though. There was a lot of changes in regulations with the SBA in the last year, which was brutal. It took us 14 months to close. We got our commitment letter 14 months ago. We had to get reapproved 5 times. Very little of that was things that were on our end. But, I could sit here and throw them under the bus. Jason Sleeman over at UCB, they killed it. They did a great job. It's just the saying what everyone else is saying, it takes longer. There are things that are going to be out of your control. And so how do you plan for those? Having contingencies, not using your contingencies as like, well, I'm just going to use that as part of construction. No. You need to have a contingency so that when your change order comes in and you get hit with, whatever comes across your plate, you actually have backup money. You're always going to be able to use that as working capital if you don't end up using it. So don't plan on using it. That's, the biggest thing that I could say is be over prepared to the max. Consultants, talk to breweries. We talked to, I think, 23 breweries before we opened up our original location. We talked even more about opening a production facility and opening a second location. There are so many people out there that are willing to give their advice away for free. Talk to them, see what bankers they liked and what they didn't like, see what construction companies they liked and didn't like, see what things worked, find comps in everything you do, whether it's a location or size of a brew house and their output. There's just way too much data out there to go into it half-cocked going, I've got this. You don't. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. You definitely don't. And there are plenty of people out there that have made the mistakes before you and took the bullet before you to be able to learn from their mistakes.
No, that's great advice there. Who's ready to step up to the podium next?
I'll go real quick. One of the things that we pretty good sized mistake that we made was not having one project manager. We kind of all did bits and pieces, but there wasn't really any cohesive. We talked to each other all the time, but man, there was a lot of things. So I would say really one person in charge of the project, and that person can then delegate out various tasks. You work on the finance piece, you work on the staffing, etc. But really one person to kind of aggregate that, make sure that the trains are running on time, that if you're collaborating with your different contractors, that you've got a schedule and so forth. So it could be a general contractor that's outside of your firm, or outside of your brewery. That's a mistake that we made. If I had to do it again, we would have done that differently. One person in charge of the whole project.
That's a great tip there. Now, Rings, will go to you next and conclude with John. Lesson learned so far, or any advice to give?
I don't know if we had really anything in terms of a lesson that was totally unexpected. I mean, there's always little things, and I think as Sean said, you talk to as many people as you can, and you try to prepare. But I mean, any battle plan is good until the first arrow is drawn from the quiver. You have, and anything you do, you have to be prepared, for things not to go according to oil. Obviously, this thing has been set back significantly by things that are out of your control, but we kind of expected that. Communication and just take as much information, be a good learner as often as you can, because, you'll hear, stuff like this is great because you hear, sometimes it's a snippet of a conversation, but, something you file away and you go, I'm going to remember that.
That is my philosophy on life. I can talk to all of you and have that one little bit that I can either pass to someone else or use to help myself. Then that's been a good day. I love that.
Right. And like you say, as much as you can surround yourself with good people, I think, we interviewed a ton of, I adjusted earlier with the banking thing, and we had a great relationship with our original bank, and they had some management changes and kind of pulled the rug out. We switched banks in this process. So, you have to be prepared. But we'd always had networked and talked to multiple banks. So we were prepared to make that move if we had to. We didn't want to, but we did. There was some groupthink going on during COVID, and making 20-year decisions based on a 6-month thing was it was blowing my mind, but that's what happened. So
awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here today, John. I'd love to hear what you would do differently.
I don't know what I would do differently necessarily. I'm sure there's a ton of things if I sat down and really thought about it, but the best piece of advice I can give, and I think this goes along with some of the other comments, is, be ready to pivot. Don't feel married to a particular idea. As an example, when we opened up Springboro, we really thought we would bring the same service model in the Springboro that we run downtown, which is very self-service oriented. You go to the bar to get your own beer, you go to the kitchen and place your food order and go pick it up. And we were going to try to run that same model here, and the people in Springboro told us that wasn't going to work. So we had to shift to a more traditional table service model here, which was a complete departure for us. But had we not done that, this would have collapsed on itself. So, it's okay to admit that you're wrong and be willing to pivot, see where the the customers are telling you to go, and sometimes you gotta do it, right? So just be ready for that. It's going to happen.
No, that's great advice there. Just listen and learn. And I appreciate the four of you being willing to share your experiences so far. We could probably have this conversation for 3 more hours and not repeat anything we've said so far, and just give further insight. And maybe we will someday. But I look forward to beers together in the new year. So Rings, John, Kary, and Sean, always a pleasure seeing you all. Go enjoy the rest of your night. Take a little time for you, and have a happy holidays, and see you eventually.
Thanks, Andrew, for what you're doing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.